Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. I hope you're doing awesomely well. This is your host, Courtney Townley, and as always, I am so deeply grateful that you are spending a little bit of your time here with me. And I have a great interview for you today. It actually is one of my clients that I've been working with for the past 6 months. Her name is Patti Ziegler, and she is a rock star. She is 67 years old, and she is taking ownership of her life. And it's a really beautiful thing to see. And I want to share a bit of her journey with you. And she graciously agreed to come on and share some of the nuggets that she has learned and really sort of explore with you the process of what it's like to coach with me. So I hope you're up for that. I hope that sounds exciting. I promise you it will be well worth your time. There are so many incredible lessons baked into this interview. And more than anything, I think this interview is going to help you tremendously to normalize some of the challenges you may be facing along your own health journey, and also fire you up to dig a little deeper and take action that really moves the needle in the direction of progress. Now, before I get there, before we dive into the interview, I want to share with you that I am teaching a live workshop on June 29th at noon that is called Ignite Your Confidence in the Health Arena and Beyond. Why am I teaching this workshop? I'm teaching this workshop because confidence is a conversation I have had with every single client, every single student that I have ever worked with. Because think about it, what gets in the way of you taking meaningful action? It's self-doubt. It's judgment. It's all the things that dampen our self-confidence. If you want to create meaningful change in your life, you have got to fortify your confidence muscle. And I have some skills and tools that will help you to do that in very powerful ways. So I'm teaching this workshop again, June 29th at noon. It is paid. It's $19 to attend this workshop. And even if you cannot be there live, or you can't be there live, or you're listening to this podcast after the live date has passed, you can still purchase the workshop. You will have access through an online course vault that has all the resources and the replay of the class and all of that goodness. So if you would like access to the workshop, whether it's live or after the fact, you can register by going to graceandgrit.com/ignite. Once again, graceandgrit.com/ignite. And now, without any further delay, let's dive into this incredible interview with Miss Patti Ziegler. So Patti Ziegler, I am so happy that you are here and decided to join me on the Grace and Grit podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, I know I just said this to you, but I am truly and deeply so happy that you're here because I love all of my clients. I truly do. And you were just one that really stood out as being incredibly coachable and asking such great questions. And I felt just being so willing to rumble with hard things because it wasn't all butterflies and rainbows when we worked together.
No, it wasn't. Those were the sessions I usually wanted to skip, but I didn't.
Everybody says that. Like the hard days or when they haven't had a great week, they're like, I thought about canceling my session today. Yeah. And I always remind them that, no, that's exactly when you need to come to a session because we work through all that stuff. So before we launch into your experience and some of the things you want to share with listeners, why don't you just tell listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I am a teacher. I've been in higher education for many years, and I'm looking toward retirement. That was one of the first things that Courtney and I talked about, in fact, how to make that decision and so on. I earned my doctorate degree from the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis. I teach court reporting, so it's a highly specialized skill, very difficult program, but I really enjoy teaching. I have 2 daughters and a dog.
A puggle. You have a puggle.
Puggle, that's right, Jackson, yes.
Just slightly a different size than my Great Dane.
Yes, slightly.
Yeah. Just a few pounds lighter. Yeah.
Just a few.
So you've actually been around the block of Grace and Grit for a long time. You have done other programs with me. You've done group programs. You've listened to the podcast for a long time. What actually made you decide to finally sign up for private coaching?
Okay, yeah, I was trying to think back to when I first learned about Grace and Grit, and I really can't remember. I've been listening for so long, several years. I think my first group session was Consistency Code, which maybe was like 3 years ago in the fall. And one of the things that you said, Courtney, that's really resonated with me was the difference between passive action and massive action. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I must be one of the queens of passive action. I never thought about it. I mean, I bought all the books and gone to all the program, all the things, but missed out on that step of consistent, massive action. Yeah. And massive even sounds so overwhelming, but no, just do the work.
Yeah, because massive action isn't big action. Why don't you explain in your own words the difference between the two so listeners understand if they've never heard that concept?
Right. Well, passive is reading, listening, thinking about it.
It's consuming. Yeah.
Yes. Buying the new clothes to do the workout, all those things. Massive is like going to the gym.
Yeah. Applying what you know.
Yeah. Just do it. Exactly. Right. And another thing I heard you say, I think I often tried to cheat the system. It's like, well, if I just sign up and go once in a while, then that counts.
Right.
Well, no.
Right.
Well, and it does. It counts. It's something, but it's not that massive action that will really bring some results. So then I would get frustrated and quit.
I always call that the one toe dipped approach. Like we want to get results by just dipping one toe into the pool and not really committing.
Right.
Or the other alternative is we commit just enough that we feel like we should be getting results, but we're also uncommitting enough that we end up just treading water and not getting any results.
Exactly. Or backsliding.
Right, of course. And this is really a full body submersion type effort, right? Like if you want to create meaningful change, it's being all in. So what I hear you saying is you signed up for coaching because you wanted to be more of a massive action taker. You wanted to be more consistent.
And I think it was right at it was like in December, right at kind of after 10 months of the pandemic, I had put on some weight and I couldn't get any traction with anything. So I thought, well, I shouldn't really spend that money. I'm like, wait a minute, why not?
Yeah.
Spend the money and do the work this time, do the massive action, be accountable to all those calls. And so that really is why I decided to do it. And I'm so glad I did.
Yeah. So this is my next, you're kind of bringing this up early on, but money is always an issue for people, right? Like investing in ourselves. I don't think it's actually necessarily the money per se that's the issue. It's the idea of investing this kind of money into your own growth. And so now that you're on the other side of coaching, do you feel like it was worth the investment?
Oh, totally. I mean, I have this, it's like I made a list of all the things that I have learned that I will continue to use and think about. And yes, it was totally worth the investment. Totally.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So in your own words, I would love for you to try to describe the coaching experience. What was it like for you?
Well, and I've had different therapists over the years and blah, blah, all of that stuff. This really was quite different.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love that you do is that you record it. So you really can listen to it again and go like, wow, did I really? Or you say, I look back and you said da, da, da. Is that, and so that kind of thing was good. But I think, Courtney, you have, I don't know how best to say this. You just have such a gentle yet firm approach.
I lovingly hold your feet to the fire, right?
There you go. Yeah. It's grace and grit. I mean, it really, really is, because you will hold me accountable.
Sure.
You always ask me good questions. How's that working for you? How do you want to show up for this? So, and just a constant reminder that it doesn't have to be perfect. Mm-hmm. It's a practice. Mm-hmm. I think that was something new that I really learned too, because, it's a practice. No, if you don't practice something, you lose it. I mean, that's true with anything, whether it be a musical instrument or court reporting or good, healthy habits. Yeah. And are you going to do it perfectly every day? No, that's okay. It doesn't have to mean you don't do it again for a day or a week or 50 pounds. Yeah. It just means, okay, it's all right.
So let me ask you this, like you partly came in for weight loss. And now knowing what you know, what do you feel like is motivating you now to continue that journey? Because do you think it's the same motivator you came in with?
Not quite. No, because now I think it kind of goes back to that cheating the system. Yeah. Because I think you can do that in your 20s and 30s, maybe even in your 40s.
Well, you get to 50. And we kind of we convince ourselves we're getting away with it, right?
Right. And then suddenly in your mid 60s, it catches up with you. At least it did me. Mm-hmm. And so now I think I am more aware of just the importance of eating breakfast with some protein. Have some protein at every meal, not like 2 grams of protein, but 10 to 20 grams of protein. And so being consciously aware of that, trying to cut out sugar, not cut it out, but just to eat more healthy.
Well, and I always like to say, lead the dance with sugar. Like you want to feel like you're in charge of sugar. Yes. And on that note, I think it's so important to recognize that you gave up something really big in this endeavor, in this coaching process. And it wasn't something that I told you to give up or asked you to give up. It was something that you chose to give up on your own. And we want to share that with the listeners?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, and it's wine. I mean, I like wine, and I used to have a policy that I just would never drink wine in my own home alone. Mm-hmm. Because it would get out of hand. I would, drink not just 2 glasses, but maybe 3 or whatever. Yeah. And we talked about how wine is processed in the body by the liver and how it makes it even that much harder for weight loss. And I'm like, why am I keeping on doing this? Then when the pandemic came, of course, it's like, well, I can only have it at home because I can't go anywhere. So then I gave myself permission to drink even more. And I just needed to stop that. Yeah. And I remember a call with you, Courtney, and I think what you said to me is, when would you give it up or whatever? And I said, I'd like to sometime. And you said, well, why not now? Or something to that effect. And I'm like, well, that's a darn good question. Why not now? And I thought about it for a couple more days and just decided, I'm just going to do this. Yeah. And, your support along the way certainly helped, because we always started our calls with wins. Yeah. Well, that was always a win not that I'll never drink again, but until I feel like I really can handle it better, I just shouldn't do it.
So I love that you're bringing this up. And I know a lot of listeners will be able to relate to this, because maybe their thing isn't alcohol, but maybe it's bread or it's sugar or it's Netflix or it's social media. Everyone has their vice. And what you said earlier is you were kind of in a space of engaging with some behaviors that you knew weren't helpful to the outcome you wanted to achieve, but you were also kind of convincing yourself that you could cheat the system or you could get away with certain things. And it's so interesting because I think that our culture really largely promotes this idea that everything in moderation is okay. And I always push back on that concept because I feel like with certain things, especially things that we use as buffers, we use to distract ourselves or numb ourselves, we aren't necessarily chemically in a space to handle those substances in moderation. And so the most mature and loving thing we can do for ourselves is to just say, you know what, for a while, we're going to take a time out. We're going to take a break and we're going to separate and go our own ways and see what comes of that. So on that note, I'm dying to know what did come of it for you? Like what has been the benefit on the other side of giving up alcohol for a while?
And I think this is one thing that I've learned about myself through this whole process with you, Courtney. It is self-respect.
Yeah.
And I just don't hate myself.
Yeah.
Or it's not leading the dance. I am. That I just think that's so important that I have that respect for myself. Yeah, I'm just not doing this right now. Now, there are some other things that I still need to work on.
Sure.
But yeah, that has felt like a large win. And I agree with you completely. There are some things that I do not make chocolate chip cookies in my house.
Yeah.
I just don't, because I love the dough. They don't even have to
Who doesn't, Patti?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So we don't do that anymore at our house.
So given that this was such a big win, right? You starting to lead the dance with alcohol again, like that's such an empowering thing. Would you say it was your biggest win? Or if not, what do you think your biggest win in the past? Because we coached for 6 months. Yeah.
Right. I just kind of have this list. I mean, I think.
Read me the list. I would love to hear the list.
Okay. Yeah. Well, awareness.
Yeah.
Just being aware
of how you move through the world. Yeah.
Yes. And I've journaled for years, but it was always about what everybody else was doing, what was going on. It was never about how did I feel about it. So that whole piece of journaling and just being aware of what my own thoughts are. I mean, sometimes I'll just sit down and write, okay, what is going on here?
Yeah.
How does this feel? Anyway.
Do I like my reasons? That's like one of my favorite awareness things. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And do you like your reasons for doing it?
Right. And maybe sometimes, sure.
Yeah.
And then other times it's like, well, no, that's not. Yeah, exactly. Just that whole thing of managing my thoughts.
Yeah.
And we've been, oh gosh, Courtney, I remember that one time I was going into a meeting with a really tough colleague. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to say and how I wanted, I was so upset about it. And you said to me, Patti, how do you want to show up?
Right, because you can't control her.
Exactly. And it was like, I had to be 67 years old to figure that out. Hello, but it's true.
Right.
And so it really, in so many situations, it's like, how do I want to show up? And then act accordingly, not be worried. So I can't control a single thing about what any of them do.
No.
So, and that often works, not always, but often.
Of course.
It really does. Yeah. You have, so just this whole thing about alignment. I mean, I have been in alignment at times in my life where I followed a protocol very strictly and lost the weight and then fell right out of alignment.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I know when I'm aligned, I know when I'm not, and I've got pages written about that.
Yeah.
And then how to pivot.
How to get back into alignment if you find yourself kind of, getting,
exactly.
And another word for that is integrity, right? When we find ourselves being out of integrity with ourselves. So our actions are something that contradict what we truly want for our life. And that feels really crummy.
It does. It does. And it kind of goes back to one of the first things we did in one of your classes, maybe all of them. What's your why? Why do I want to do this? Yeah. And even I remember at the time, my why was so I didn't get diabetes.
Right.
And at the time you're like, well, that's, yes, that's good. But can we think of something more immediate?
Yeah.
Because the diabetes is so far down the road and blah, blah. And there again, I think I maybe even said this to you. So I just don't hate myself.
Yeah.
I just want to have self-respect again. And that's the integrity that you're talking about.
And, hating yourself, it requires a lot of resources. It takes up a lot of mental energy and bandwidth and just capacity and ability that you could be dedicating to other things.
Right.
And a lot of people I coach in the beginning will say to me, well, this is just the way I am. I've always hated myself.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll say to them, it's not the way you are. It's the way you learned to be. You have practiced a pattern of thinking and talking to yourself over many, many years that has led to this feeling of hating yourself. And it really is a thought pattern, right? It is a habit, something you've done so many times, you literally do it without having to think. And the reason it's so important for people to understand that is because learning to like yourself is the same process. It's coming up with the things that you want to believe about yourself, because you're not destined to believe anything. You get to choose. How do you want to think about yourself? And you think a thought enough times, it becomes a belief. And we act in accordance to our beliefs.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, that kind of goes back to that thought model and how, yes. And I have learned those things by working with you.
Yeah.
Even with all the therapy I've ever had in my life, I never really learned that. I maybe never really vocalized it to a therapist either.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one advantage of working with you, Courtney. You are so open and graceful and gritty, but I almost think sometimes having this over the internet, there's just enough distance there that maybe it's easier to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's ever said that before, but I think that was true for me.
Yeah.
It's like, I just got to tell Courtney this.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's important for people to understand is that the benefit you get out of something like coaching or therapy is only going to be as deep as your honesty.
That's so true.
Because, right, I mean, I can only coach you based on what you share with me. And so I feel like the most impactful coaching sessions are always when a client comes to the table really rumbling and being willing to be vulnerable within the rumble.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really struggling right now, and I'm really having a hard time with this. And that's where the best coaching happens.
Right.
So I want to ask you, because not only do you have experience with therapy, but you also have experience doing other health-based programs. You've did Weight Watchers for years. You've done other protocols that were very specific in terms of somebody else outlining for you exactly the way it was going to roll, and you just had to follow instructions. Working with me is very different from that.
It is.
And so I would love for you to speak a little bit to what you feel is different in this process and this work than those other things.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things you do is encourage us to drink water. Drink water first thing in the morning. Well, duh, that makes such good sense. I never heard that from another protocol.
Yeah.
But also, like I said, eat protein at every meal.
Yeah.
Space your food throughout the day. And it's not necessarily that those others didn't have that, but I mean, you encourage us to eat real food.
Yeah. So I educated you about nutrition, but I actually never wrote your protocol.
No, you never did.
No.
And we tried hard to get to a point where I was planning every meal, and I still don't do that. But what I do, I have like a list of foods that I eat for breakfast.
Perfect.
So pick one.
Yeah.
Then I have a list of what I eat for lunch. Pick one and eat before these times. So because I always said, I don't like to be that confined. I don't like to plan that much. And yet I plan every single day in my classroom.
Right.
So But I give myself the flexibility that seems to work, and also the tracking. I mean, we talked about somehow hack your brain to make it fun. And so I have gone to using the Weight Watchers app, and I was like, oh, that takes so much time. And I think you remember a friend of mine said, she does that. And I'm like, well, how long does that take? And she said, oh, probably 2 minutes at night before I go to bed.
Right.
And you were like, oh, really, Patti?
I think what surprises a lot of people when they coach with me is that, they will come in with some idea of what maybe I'm going to believe or press upon them. So if they're a vegetarian, they might be nervous that I can't support vegetarianism. Or if they want to do Weight Watchers, they think that coaching can't be effective within that. And what I always tell everybody is I don't decide what's right for you ever. What I do is educate you about the human body, about how food and thoughts and emotions affect our decision making and our relationship with those things. And I give you some gateways for starting to organize yourself better, right? In terms of coming up with some kind of plan for how you are going to respond to the world tomorrow rather than react to it. And then I invite you to experiment. Right? Like try some things on and see what feels good and makes you feel successful. And if something is really not a great fit, you just move on to a new experiment.
That's okay. Yeah.
It's totally okay. But it's the willingness to get in that arena and try some things on and be very honest about why it's not working. Is it not working because you're not showing up to execute it? Or is it not working because it just doesn't feel like a good fit for you in your life?
Right. And Courtney, through Rumble and Rise, you give, we had some meal prep sessions this summer. I mean, how fun, some new ideas, and I have to tell you, I am cooking more at home now than maybe ever in the last 15 years. And I've actually found it kind of fun.
Yeah.
So it's, kind of flipping my mindset to just doing things more healthy for my body. Right. Yeah. And you have supported that. And like you said, you've kind of given ideas. We've tried some of those.
Yep.
So it's, I would say that I came in with a mindset to lose weight. That's still important to me, but now I understand better how to do that.
Yeah. And more importantly, I think you understand how to keep it off, right? It's not just a matter of losing the weight, but it's actually changing the way you think about yourself. So when you reach that goal, you feel like it's just the way you are.
Right.
Versus just following a plan written by somebody else that, yes, you lose weight on, but then you don't have the skill sets, the emotional agility, the thought management, all of those things that will help you to actually sustain that behavior.
Exactly. All of that practice that you teach.
Everything's a practice. Yeah.
It is. Everything is. Yeah. There's one other thing that I wanted to be sure to say, and it is the whole concept of arguing for the bright side.
Yeah.
Because, my mind, maybe this is just human nature too, but my mind can go down that dark rabbit hole so fast.
You're so human.
Yeah, I guess and it's like, oh no, here, let's just think about I think you say give it equal time.
Yeah, give it equal bandwidth, right? In terms of like the amount of time you're spending arguing for something.
Right. And that I think I think that will change my life for the long haul. I really do.
In huge ways. It will.
So like, was the money worth it? Totally.
Yeah.
Totally great investment. It really, truly was.
I love it. So what would you say to a woman who has been, because there's a lot of these people out there that have been listening to the Grace and Grit podcast, not for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, but literally for probably almost 6 years. Like I get emails from people telling me I've listened to every single episode, 240 episodes, Patti. Wow. And I'm thinking, and you're still not a member of Rumble and Rise, or you haven't worked with me in any kind of program. And the reason I emphasize that is because as a podcast listener, the work that we do in private coaching inside of Rumble and Rise, it takes what you learn on the podcast to such a different level. Would you agree with that?
totally. Well, it's probably more toward massive action
It's application.
than just listening to it. Listening is good, but then actually, the coaching calls. I mean, it's just so interesting to hear everybody's story. You realize you're not in this alone.
Yeah,
We
and
all
your
have
problems are
these
not isolated
issues.
to you.
Right. And the individual coaching, I mean, I highly recommend it. I really, really do. Give it a try. I think that they'll be very pleased. I have been.
So you came in for health reasons. And I'm curious to know, how do you think the coaching has affected other areas of your life outside of just health? You shared the story about the coworker. That's a great example.
Right. And I think even with my daughters, I have to remind myself, how do I want to show up, regardless of what all's going on there, just in every relationship that I have. And there are some that I'm still not quite sure how I want to show up. Some that are still kind of raw, and that's, that'll just be what it is. But at least I feel like I have some different tools. So that whole emotional health, I think, is just so much better. Not that I never have bad days, but when I start down that road, it's like, okay, let's do that little morning practice that we know and just do that. And then at the end of the day, to actually stop and think about what did go well today.
Yeah. Or even too, like, what message did that emotion have for me? Right. So if I did have an off day, usually to me, that means that you felt something that probably wasn't comfortable to feel.
Right.
But it doesn't even mean you're off. It means that there's a message that is trying to be related to you about the way you're living your life. What is it?
Right. Yeah, to acknowledge. Well, it's back to that awareness thing, to acknowledge it, realize it, and then decide what to do with it.
And to not buffer, to not eat because you feel that thing, or drink because you feel that thing, because all that does is numb it. And then it has to get louder because you haven't really dealt with it.
Right.
And then we wonder how we get into these positions where we feel so disconnected from ourselves.
Right. And I'm just not sure that I ever really learned before how to deal with that sheet you give us on 2 pages worth of emotions, the feelings. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch.
Who knew? There were so many.
No, yes, there really are.
Yeah.
And to identify that, and it's like, okay, why am I feeling that way? What message is it giving to me? And then how can I find another side of that, or recognize it for what it is? Yeah. I remember, Courtney, this has been a couple of years ago, my first puggle, this might make me cry, my first puggle died.
Okay.
And I was just total. That's the first time I've really lost a pet like that. Yeah. And I was just distraught. And you sent me an email back that said, feel all the feels. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that means I'm going to be crying like 24/7. Yeah. Which, there was a lot of that. Yeah. But it helped me get through it, and I wasn't buffering my way through it. And so because life has sad times for sure, hard times for sure.
Well, and I remember another conversation you and I had, you had lost some people this year in your life, that passed away for various reasons. And the same emotion came up, right? That kind of that grief and sadness. And I remember telling you that, sadness it's such a gift to feel it, because it means that something meant something to you, right? What a privilege to feel grief. And I'm not saying it's easy, and it definitely comes in waves, but it is such a privilege that we cared about something so much that now we feel the loss.
Yeah. Would you believe I have even shared that, Courtney, with friends?
I'm so glad, because I tell everybody, right? If you teach what you learn it in a deeper way. So please teach everything you learn. To people who are willing to receive it.
There's always that. They might go, oh no, here she comes again.
I know. I always say to my students, do not give unsolicited advice. If somebody is hurting or somebody is struggling and you have something to help them, offer. And if they accept, teach away.
That's one thing. Yes.
Teach away.
That's so true.
Excellent. So is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think one of the first things that we talked about, where we talked about my why, and it did have to do with whether or not I should retire and my heart and all those things. What I said was that I wanted to be independent and adventurous going forward into retirement.
Yes.
And it's been really, really good to remind myself of that. I mean, that why, who do you want to be? Boy, never lose, it's easy to lose sight of that sometimes, but just hold on to it.
And also, doesn't it feel better to take care of yourself from that space of excitement and in dedication to this future that you want for yourself, rather than I have to lose weight because, like, the 10,000 reasons we carry around with that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it's a whole different mindset. I get to go for a walk.
Yeah.
Not, I have to go for a walk. I mean, it's
Right.
like, no, I get to. My body is still working with me, so let's go.
And maybe I'm going to strength train in dedication eventually to some adventure I'm going to take in a foreign country. I don't know. But
Right.
I definitely think that looking through a lens that feels exciting and fun and in contribution to being a sort of a brighter version of yourself, or just a future version of yourself. You're a very bright version right now. Like, please do not hear me saying that. But a lot of times, you know this because you've heard me say this many times, a lot of women are chasing the past, right? I need to get back to something I was, which is never possible, by the way, right? Like, you can't go back in time ever. So can you create those results physically? Potentially, yes, if you want to put in the work and create like a similar body to what you had at the age of 35 or something. But how much more exciting to step into a version of yourself that you've never been.
Right.
That might be the best version yet.
It could be. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you. Okay. So what I hear you saying is, like, you are taking that seriously and you're doing some work on creating that, like making that happen, like creating some adventure for retirement.
That's right. Yep.
Very cool. Well, you have been nothing but a pleasure to work with. I am so honored and thrilled you came on the show. And I know a lot of women will benefit from this and be able to relate to where you're at and what you rumbled with. And the fact that, you said earlier, I can't believe it took me until age 67 to learn some of these things. It is my hope for you that you will continue to learn at 77 and 87 and 97, truly. Because that's the way of life. It's learning about who we are at this age and stage of life. It's always changing. It's always evolving. And man, we are so complex as humans. I don't think we're going to figure out all its mysteries in this lifetime.
No, I think you're right. That's a good point.
So, I will continue to learn.
And I will just say Rumble and Rise really is a good place to support all of that. Yeah, you've got all the different videos in there and you give us stuff every week. I mean, it really is a great way to support healthier living. Yeah. And just the human growth process, personal development, self-leadership. Rumble and Rise, for those of you who don't know, is the private membership. It's really reasonable. It's $59 a month and it's pretty value packed, right? Would you agree with that? Very much so. Yes. It's kind very of insane. Much. All the time. Yeah. The amount of value that's in there. So, well, I massively appreciate you. And I hope you're in Rumble and Rise. So of course our paths will be crossing. You bet. I'll see you there. And thank you again for everything, Courtney.
If Patti's interview resonated with you, and you are someone who is looking for a community of support and education so that you too can put your healthiest years ahead of you, I would encourage you to check out the Rumble and Rise membership community. This community is packed with incredible resources and opportunities for support directly from me. There are 4 primary areas of education that I focus on. Number 1, helping you to balance your chemistry. Number 2, helping you to get organized. Number 3, thought management. And number 4, emotional agility. So if you have been around the wellness arena for a while and you're looking for something that is very unlike what is being sold in sort of traditional diet and fitness culture, I cannot encourage you enough to check out this community. You can look at the details of joining by going to graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. Once again, that's graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. I hope I'll see you on the inside. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.